Welcome to Future Strike, everybody. Today we are going to be doing another Influences episode, and we're going to be talking about the seminal game in the fighting game genre, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Cliff.
I'm Spencer. Happy Sunday, everybody.
Really excited to be doing another Influences episode and talking about a game which really needs just about no introduction, which is Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. But I will say it needs no introduction, but the game, to me, I am not as familiar with it. I didn't grow up with the game like I did some of the other fighting game that are in the genre. So, Spencer, what are some of your earliest memories of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike?
Yeah, so I feel like I probably had maybe like the most typical experience for like people who were into video games at that time. I definitely remember seeing it in the arcades when it was out. But that was during the time when like we were all excited about 3D fighting games. And so you saw Street Fighter 3 and you were just like, Street Fighter, that's old news. What is this 2D game? Like, we're all excited about the new 3D, right? And I know I didn't play it in the arcade. Like the first time I played it was on Fightcade. So
And I guess for me, I don't even recall seeing it in the arcade. I think the game was 99. What year was it?
Yeah, 1999.
So 1999, I wasn't really visiting the arcades at all at that point. I was too busy, being a badass post high school guy. I wasn't familiar with the game at all until I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago when we started diving a little bit more into the fighting game.
Yeah.
This whole genre on a deeper level. And going one or two steps deep, you can't escape the game.
No,
it is the renowned game of the genre for sure, I would say.
It's like whenever they're doing, and these, come out all the time, the tier lists.
Yeah.
Like whenever people are like, oh, greatest fighting games of this or that, like it's at the top pretty much, like routinely. It's considered the best, I think, fighting game and the best of the Street Fighter games, like whatever it is, like that's the consensus.
Yes. And it's interesting how you say, and we'll dive into the, kind of our thoughts on specifics in a second, but how comparing it to some of the other games that of its time that were trying to be more modern looking, those have actually aged more poorly than this game. Like you look at, Mortal Kombat or something like that. It looks pretty dated, but it looked so awesome at the time. And now it does not hold up, but this game does hold up.
No, it does. I mean, it's just great. Yeah, great example of the 2D animation. Like it's beautiful. Yeah. The animation is so beautiful. In fact, what's funny is I'm pretty sure this was like part of the memories. I remember being at the arcade and playing Street Fighter EX, which is the like 3D. It's on a 2D plane, but it was like with 3D graphics, right? It kind of had that Tekken look. And like, I had a great time. Like I was super excited about that. And, it's one of these things where, in retrospect, you're just like, oh God, like nobody cares about EX anymore, really. Like, even though, it's still fun, like, but Third Strike, that's the game.
Let's dive into our deep dive of the game a little bit so we can really sort of think about this stuff. So we're talking about, so the visual design of Third Strike. I guess what struck me about it, I was thinking about this because we just played the game, 10 minutes ago. I was just thinking about how this versus a 3D, more sort of photorealistic game, ironically, what struck me the most, I think, of the 2D pixel graphics, it's actually quite a bit more expressive in a way and just more dramatic.
It's pretty amazing. Like I've watched, I'm not a animator or illustrator at like at
Hmm.
all,
Oh, I
but
know.
because I'm interested in it, I was sort of watching videos about like the principles of animation, and there are some good ones I think, and we should link to these that talk a little bit about the animation in Street Fighter, and I believe it's Third Strike. Yeah, showing kind of all the ways that they just like really exploit these principles to make the movement so dynamic and exciting, and you really kind of feel the force of it. And yeah, you watch it frame by frame, and it really is kind of beautiful and expressive in a way that just like, yeah, the 3D games, as good as they look, like, you know, there are some great animations in those too. Somehow it's like there isn't enough stretch or smear, right? They don't kind of exaggerate it enough to really just give that impact that this game has.
No, it's very exciting. And I mean, I know we were just playing it and I was getting my ass handed to me, handily. And I was having a great time because it was so dramatic, and the way some of the moves kind of, they're snappy,
Yeah.
visually speaking. And I mean, and the feel is a whole other thing when you're playing it, but it's just very exciting to look at. And the backgrounds too, I think, are just beautifully painted. I could see why this is the game that is standing the test of time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and when you watch the high level players too, like, I mean, the way when they pull off their parries and things like this, it's just like I don't know if in that case if you call it like hit stop or whatever, right? But it's like the parry stop, in the game. And
Hmm.
you just like those moments when they just like get these like insane parries, you know what I mean? Like high drama, and it's just like that flash and the pause, and it just like sets up their, reversal of their counter or whatever. It's like so exciting.
Hmm.
Yeah, they did such a nice job with all that in this game.
Yeah, and of course too, the way that the visuals actually communicate to you as a player to react a specific way, and it's true to how it looks the way you want it to. And when you hit the input, it reacts, and the feedback is really satisfying as well.
Yeah.
um which I guess feeds into the next kind of overarching thing that we like to talk about, which is sort of the mechanics of the game. So what do you think of the basic, mechanics of this versus other of its genre?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one for Third Strike, I think, really is the parry.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's some other things too. I don't know if this counts as a mechanic, but like light punch, light kick is the throw. And there's a universal overhead, and there's some nice things that I think they sort of smoothed out with the inputs in this version for sure. Um, I think the big one is the parry, and there's like a red parry too, which like I know I've read about. Like I don't know how to pull those off, but
Hmm.
um, but that is really interesting. And again, it like, for the most part, I can only do that kind of randomly because I'm
Hmm.
not that good. Occasionally, I can kind of get one where I'm like, oh yeah, I was trying to parry that. Like a
Hmm.
fireball from across the screen, I can get,
You
but
can
like
get
when you're
that.
in close in those moments where you really need to, it's like I'm not there yet. But yeah, again, it's like when you watch those high level players do it, it's so awesome to see how. I mean, those people who like, I mean, and this is not, I don't think this is super high level, like, and they're jump ins, you know what I mean? They're jumping in and they just like parry the, whatever it
Hmm.
is, the anti-air punch, right? Um, how cool is that, right? I mean, and that's just so different from all the other Street Fighter games and most of the other fighting games that don't have it, right? Where like the jump in is, you don't have
you're
an answer like that, right? A way to kind of like anticipate what the person is going to
you're
do, right?
vulnerable, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that clearly just adds a level of depth to it, and it's really interesting. And we can talk more about this later when we talk about like lessons for Future Strike. I think it's interesting to think about like how a parry affects the balance in the game.
Hmm.
Because it's like, well, the fact that any character played by somebody with sufficient skill and knowledge, right, can really kind of like be quite good at, you know, shutting down any other character, if they're the better parrier, right? If they kind of know how to do that. Um,
It's interesting how that is, to be like a perfect parrier of every character. You have to be understanding the in and out of every character, and the inverse of every character in a sense.
yeah,
So just back to the visuals really quick. I wanted to touch on just the character uh, roster a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
That's part of the visuals, right? Visual design, I
yeah, yeah.
guess.
Oh,
Um, I don't know. I just want to touch really quick on the characters that I don't know, and maybe you know the answer to this. Like, where are these characters from? Like, these are completely different.
yeah,
There's Ken and there's Chun Li, and that's pretty much it from Street Fighter 2 to Street Fighter 3.
yeah. Ryu
So,
and Akuma.
oh, okay. So Ryo and Akuma, but there's some wacky
Yeah.
characters in this game.
Otherwise, it's different.
Is
Yeah.
that just it's just a larger cast of characters that's not included in Street Fighter 2 or
So, we'll link to there are some great videos out there about like the history and the creation of this game and kind of,
yeah,
why it is different in the way that it is. My understanding is that it was a different team of people
right.
at Capcom and I think it started not as a Street Fighter game.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but eventually it became one. But then my understanding is I think the team was trying to kind of like, branch out and not just have
Mm-hmm.
it be the same characters again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's why it was a lot of different characters. And I think Chun-Li isn't in the Street Fighter 3 second impact. I think she's not in those. I think she only
Mm-hmm.
shows up at Third Strike.
Hmm.
So even that, it was sort of like, a later concession, right, to the fans
Yeah.
back. But yeah, I
It's
mean, they're very different. And yeah, as you said, there's some wacky
it,
ones.
it's just fun having those. And I don't know, I don't know if this is off base or not, but this game wasn't super popular in the US, and maybe part of the reason why is that it's not, I don't know if this is even the right way to put it, but it's a little more Japanese anime, a little bit more, I see more of a connection with like some of the characters to Guilty Gear in a way, like these
Huh.
weird kind of rubbery, like alien, weird, freaky people that, and obviously in Street Fighter 2, you have a, big mountain gorilla guy or whatever he is, and there's some weird stuff going on there, but for the most part they're human beings and you can understand what they're doing and they're all fairly similar, but you don't have like a Guile looking guy in Third Strike, right? Like
Well, Remy is the Guile. He's
okay.
like the emo French guy, but he
Okay.
basically has like a sonic boom and a flash kick. But
Okay.
I mean, like they have like 12, you know, is doing Guilty Gear type
Yeah.
stuff, right? He's like, shooting his body into the ground and it comes out, it's like Zato or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's the guy I'm thinking of, or even that the
Necro.
other guy, Necro, sort of is like that,
Yeah.
Faust character, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of what's your feeling about that actually? I sort of like that. Like it's like I remember reading about Rufus in Street Fighter 4, who's very like
Mm-hmm.
divisive. Like lots of people don't like him because he's like goofy. He's like this round guy. Like
Oh, is he the guy who he like wants to just? Oh no, that's Birdie. I'm thinking Birdie who wants to eat all the donuts, and he's the big,
that's what. Yeah. So Birdie in Street Fighter 5 has this like donut thing. I think
yeah,
is there is this like streak of silliness in
yeah,
Street Fighter, which I actually do like. I think kind of from the outside, I think it's easy to just be like, what are they thinking with these weird characters? But then I kind of feel like, yeah, once you sort of get into the fandom of it, like it is kind of a fun streak, is that it doesn't take itself too seriously with all the characters, and I feel like that's fun. Um,
no,
but
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
I agree. I mean, it's a for one, it's a video game. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's not. This isn't. I kind of feel that way with almost every type of art, honestly, where it's like, okay, like you're not doing. What are you doing here? It's a TV show. It's a movie. It's a video game. Like we're not trying to we're not changing humanity with this thing, it's entertainment, um and let's say we are trying to change humanity, there is an aspect to being a human being which is silly and absurd,
yeah,
and if you want to try and capture the human experience through fighting game characters, you're not all going to have emo guys with who shoot
yeah,
sonic booms. You're going to have a guy who's totally whacked out from another galaxy,
yeah. They can't all be Ryu, who's just like obsessed about
right.
perfecting his. It's just like, and in some ways, he's like I mean, he has the whole like evil Ryu storyline, but in some ways he's kind of the most boring character because he's just like, oh, I must fight to get stronger. It's like, all right.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of like respect Birdie, you know.
Yeah, he's got a funny story, at least. I don't know.
Like I respect that he wants to like eat a donut. I mean, what, you know, I guess it's good for like recovery. I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
But
He's weird. In Street Fighter Five, that whole thing. We'll have to do a show on the weird stories in story mode for Street Fighter 5.
yeah.
Very strange.
Okay, well, yeah, and it is interesting. I guess we'll link to some other content about this, but I mean, it's just funny how arguably the best game of the, you know, of the series, of the whole genre, arguably, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, was so unknown to me, and I'm sure to many other kind of average people, who weren't really into the, you know, into the underground or whatever, um, until now. I guess now that everything is so accessible, you know, on YouTube and Fightcade and, you know, things like that.
It seems like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anybody has great numbers on. In fact, yeah, anybody, if you've got the numbers on like player counts or whatever, like daily, monthly for fighting games in a way that can capture people playing Third Strike, that'd be really interesting to see. Um,
Yeah.
but it does seem that way that it, in addition to kind of it being like the, the top of the tier lists, it does seem like it's still really popular in ways that some of the other ones that, like, I don't know. I mean, people do still play like Street Fighter 2. I think they play like, I forget which one it is, Hyper Fighting. There's one of the ones that I think is still kind of thought to be like the best one for the
Mm-hmm.
original or Street Fighter 2 series. But yeah, it just sort of seems like lots of the other games haven't, they don't have the longevity, right? And particularly
Mm-hmm.
when you think that this was like not a success in its time, right? It's particularly interesting that it really does seem like it's carved out a niche for itself.
So on to the feel. We kind of touched on this, but let's just kind of focus on the feel, of Third Strike. And I'll start by saying that, you know, we just played it and it's fairly unforgiving, I would say. It's pretty
Mm.
tight, um, but it's so satisfying. And again, it just, you feel the impact when you actually connect, you know, a 2 or 3 combo. I think it seems to be more difficult to string together a combo, at least for me, and um, to actually, you know, execute the moves. It's a little bit, there's a little smaller, what do you call it?
Buffer or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit of a smaller, like, you know, room for error, I guess, in order to really pull them off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think that's right. Um, but I agree. I mean, we've talked about this, I think, with Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. Like 4 has quite,
It's
well, I mean,
tough.
it's sort of notorious for its like one frame links, but even outside of that, right? Like it's, the buffer I think is larger on Street Fighter 5, and so it kind of has this looser feel. But 4 feels better, like when you're in the pocket or whatever. And this I say feels like that. It's like when you're in the pocket of the move or whatever, and you're pulling it off, like it kind of has, it's got the right feel. Um, and then yeah, and then all the feedback, right? Like the you know hit sounds and kind of combined with the visuals and um yeah, it's right where it needs to be, I think.
Yeah, and the whole attitude of the game, just from the soundtrack, the whole thing just feels great.
It's fun. They did a nice job with it. Yeah, the Third Strike. So I've only played around a little bit in Second Impact, and maybe Street Fighter 3. But Third Strike is the one that has the like kind of urban like
Mm-hmm.
voiceover, and I think some of the music is different, or maybe it's mostly different actually. But yeah, it's interesting. The whole package kind of comes together in a nice way, I think.
Yeah, I like, you know, it is interesting because, you know, I guess in Street Fighter 2, the you know, character selection screen, the background music is kind of like do 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 do, you know, it's like kind of that kind of electro music or something, right? And this is like a hip hop track.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts you in a different kind of a vibe when you're gonna like face off and you're gonna, you know, have your bout. It's somehow it is very cohesive, and I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It has the right, I don't know, the hip hop influence brings another or an additional attitude to it that it feels good.
I mean, what's funny is how, a lot of the hip hop from the early mid 90s, was highly influenced by like, kung fu films and martial arts movies and Japanese anime and, samurai films and all that sort of stuff. That gets worked in. You get all this, fight soundtrack in the background of the Wu-Tang,
Yeah, yeah.
records. Then you go to this game, which comes out right around that same time when that stuff was blowing up in the US. And now you have the hip hop in the game. And it's just sort of a funny, I don't know if that's connected or not, but it's nice.
It's very 90s,
So 90s.
late 90s, early O's, which makes sense, but it is a nice feature, as you say, that in addition to being a fun game, there are kind of these other artistic elements woven in that really kind of speak to the time, but also kind of, I don't know if I would say the best of that time, but kind of it's a nice, kind of exciting mix of what was happening then, right?
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, so let's think a little bit about for Future Strike.
Yeah.
So for the Future Strike project, what can we incorporate from Third Strike? What do you think?
I mean, pretty much all of it, I think. Like, I think, yeah, the feel, the look, the mechanics, I think there's so much to just emulate, right? It's sort of like, I feel like that's the starting point
Mm-hmm.
um, for Future Strike. So, to get a little bit, I guess, concrete about it, like what I imagine doing when we move into like production phase, for example, is like creating some set of characters, like two characters or something like this. And it's like, okay, we're going to work out the, engine and like the production pipeline until we know that we can get something that feels just like that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, once we have that, now there's this sort of additional content. There's the world to build around it, right? And kind of like flesh it out in all these different ways, like we've been talking about. But I think it's just like, the goal is to basically reproduce it and then be able to build on that, right? And build in these other, elements like, with the AI and with the kind of like moving through stages, the way that arcade mode would work and all that stuff.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think taking a game that feels just like this, but superimpose over that the concept, the world, and kind of the whole storyline of the Future Strike idea, like that's the dream. I mean, that would be so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that's what inspires us to,
Yes.
to do this whole thing. So I mean, it's really like the influence, right?
Yep.
Um, as far as just like what it needs to kind of like, yeah, what it needs to feel like, right?
Yeah. And what's also like kind of exciting to think about is how to take the modern, today's technology that we've been sort of talking about, the AI stuff and the all this other technology. You kind of just talked about this, but using today's technology and harnessing that in a way with this look, with this feel, and how to really, make it even more vast and more
Yeah.
expansive and produce like more stuff and like that.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, I think about this a lot, and one day we'll have an episode about this with people who actually like know what it takes to like animate a game
Yeah.
character. But is just trying to think about like, I mean, like we talked about in the beginning with the visual look, right? The animation is just so expressive and impactful,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, well, how do you do that like in a, as they say in the like startup world, like how do you do that at scale, right?
Right.
Because it's they spent, I think I can't remember exactly how long, but it's like at least a couple of years, like it might even have been like 4 or 5 years, but it's
Mm-hmm.
at least a couple of years, like doing all the animations for these characters, and they're doing them by hand, basically, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
right, but that's not going to fly for Future Strike. You can't sort of have it be this like painstaking hand-drawn process where it takes you like 2 years to create like 12 characters, right? It has to be the case that, you can create a character in, whatever it needs to be, like a month, a week, Um, and so, yeah, how to, in a way, kind of like abstract the quality of the animation here, right?
Yep.
Such that you can be like, oh, well, I want a new character and they're going to have moves like this, but you have figured out how to kind of like encode that in such a way that you can actually like, great, like you'll start from a canvas where like the basic moves or whatever still have that nice feel to it. There is that kind of, whatever it is, the principles of animation are kind of like built into your engine, right?
If you have three poses and you can like string them together, and then we can use that to bring them to life using those principles.
Yeah, so something like that. I've actually seen, and we can link to these too. There are creators out there who I've seen, they're doing like in 3D animation. They have in a way like found like kind of like parameters that they can just kind of like slide up or down that kind of changes the like anticipation and follow through of the movement of what they're animating,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like it's something like that, right? It's kind of figuring out how to capture what makes this so exciting, to some extent, right? In sliders, right? Such that you can be like, cool, here's the basic kick for this character. We're going to dial the sliders up like this, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes their kick, and then the next character, you kind of adjust it, right, for them. And things like I feel like that's the way to do it, I think.
Yep. Super exciting stuff. We're not going to go on and on, everybody, because we could keep going on and on and on and on and on. So I think we'll just wrap up there. Thank you for joining. Like, subscribe, comment below. Please click the bell and let us know if you have an idea for something you'd like us to talk about in another episode. Until next time.